And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everyone, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to check out another game from Level 99 Games. This time we have a strategy dexterity game called Disc Duelers for 2 to 6 players that plays relatively quickly, about 45 minutes, but it does depend on which one of the variations you play. In this game, each player is going to have discs that they're going to be flicking around a board, trying to avoid different obstacles, trying to pick up items, and trying to deal damage to their opponents. Or maybe they're trying to play soccer, or maybe they're playing volleyball, or maybe they're racing around the board. But you have all kinds of options, all types of items, and different characters with different abilities that are going to adjust the game. So real quick, why don't we take a look at what you get inside of this box and how the game plays, and then I'll come back here and sum it all up for you at the end. Due to limited space constraints, we're going to show you a game that is on a much smaller area than, of course, you should be playing on. And also, we're not following all of the exact rules. The rules of the game actually say that when you pick your characters, you're going to set them up basically starting at any edge of the table that you're on. Now, I can't show you an entire table, but I'm on a large table here that I could be using all of the space on, and of course would be a better game if I were. But you can set up your character on the edge of any edge of the table, and you're going to flick it twice in order to get them into play. So, for example, I could flick this 1, 2 moves in order to get it into play, and she would then move one. Andrea's over there with the camera, and we would move all of our characters into play, strategically placing them at the beginning of the game. So let's just kind of place them out on the board right now. Now you'll see that I have some type of obstacles set up on the board here. I have various different makeshift pieces of terrain. We have the Pixel Tactics 2 box, we have a 3DS, and we have my Snapple that I've been drinking in order to, keep my voice while doing reviews. But each player is going to kind of set up their people by flicking them into the board in order to have them ready to go. Now, each of these characters, as I said, has different characteristics. For example, Aria here has 3 attacks and 1 movement. And it also says that her ranged attacks begin at any edge of a table, so she can make attacks from the edge of the table to shoot people that she's not even near. Or we have Cadenza here, who's a knight. He's got armor, he has 2 attacks and 1 movement, and it says on here that he does not take damage from disc collisions. That would mean outside of his turn. He's not going to take any damage from disc collisions. We have Enderbrit here, who has 2 attacks and 2 movement, but he starts the game with 5 items, and he can choose 3 of them to equip. So he's got 3 items over here. He has cross trainers, which give him an extra movement permanently. He has a demolition charge, which says that he can run into a terrain and blow it up. It's gone from the game. And he has a flamethrower that he can use, which essentially says he can make a ranged attack where he can hit everybody that's covered by his hand for 1 damage. So he has all kinds of items he uses, and some of those will be permanent, and some of them are one-time uses. And all of her other characters have their own additional abilities. Know that the abilities are varied. Some people just teleport around the board. They don't have any movement. Some people can discard items to get extra attacks, or various other things. One person in the game can actually lift up terrain and shoot under it in order to make their targeting a little bit easier. But essentially the way the game is going to work is that each player is going to take turns activating one of their characters on the board. So, for example, I over here might activate Berman. Berman gets 2 attacks and 2 movements, and he also says that they do +1 more damage if he knocks his attacked disc more than 1 foot from where it started. So he can hit harder than normal if he, does it appropriately. So we'll see that we have these little crates out here. At the beginning of the game, we actually drop these to see where they go, and this one ended up over here somewhere. So these are going to be what items come from. But on my turn, I get 2 movement and 2 attack. And essentially, each time I flick the disc or move the disc, I have to decide whether I'm using a movement or an attack. So I could say, okay, I'm going to move. I hit it very poorly, but I hit it, and that's my movement, 1. I have 2 movements, so I could move again. So maybe I decide to move again. Very poor again. Let's say it's a little bit better, and I move like that. All right. While moving, if I hit any terrain, that's fine. I can hit a terrain and bounce off of it, no problem. If I hit another disc, however, I'm going to take a damage. So if I were to flick like this and somehow mess up and hit my own disc, I'm going to take a damage for that, as would the disc that's being hit. So, not so good. But during attacks, you're trying to hit other players. So now that I've done my 2 movement and I've ended up here, I can take my 2 attacks. I have an attack here. I go like this, boom, and I hit that character. And he's going to take a point of damage. If I had hit a piece of terrain, I would take a point of damage. Or if, for example, I had hit this character into a piece of terrain, he's going to take 1 for being hit and 1 for hitting the piece of terrain, which is 2. The maximum number of damage you can do to a character from an attack is 3. That would be 1 for hitting the disc, 1 for forcing it into a piece of terrain, and if you manage to get it to fall off of the table, 1 more point. That's not necessarily true for Berman, who can do 1 extra damage if he moves the disc an extra 1 foot away from where he attacked them. So he could theoretically do 4 points of damage. 2 for hitting them more than a foot, 1 for knocking them off of the table, and 1 for hitting a piece of terrain. So you can do 4 points of damage. Each person only has 5 hit points, so 4 points of damage would be a huge attack. But you want to be careful during your movement to not hit other discs, and you want to be careful during your attacks to not hit terrain with your own discs because you could damage yourself. As I said, you can use items that you've accumulated throughout in order to do additional things like move more, or blow up pieces of terrain, or move pieces of terrain, or do all types of various stuff that changes in this thing. In addition, you can move over these crates in order to draw items. So for example, maybe Andrea, who is filming, activates Caesar here, and he moves over to touch this crate. When he does so, the crate's going to get removed. We're going to look at the top card of the deck, and he's going to get a cursed doll. It says on the cursed doll that you may make an attack with another character. You control all effects of that character's attack. So he would attach this to Caesar, or she would attach this to Caesar, and now has an item that they can use as an attack to control somebody else and make an attack. And once they do so, you'll see that it has a discard icon on it. It's a once per game effect. So he's taken 1 movement. He has now 1 more movement and 1 attack. So maybe he moves over here, and then he decides to attack Cadenza. And he flicks, and he hits him, and Cadenza would take 1 point of damage. That would be the end of Caesar's turn. And then I, of course, would activate another one of my people. So you'll see you're going to try and manipulate your discs around the pieces of terrain, or, if you're Caitlin here, manipulate the terrain itself in order to get good attacks on your opponents and prevent them from getting good attacks on you. Of course, you want to use the abilities of your cards to your benefit, but basically, it's a strategic movement flicking game using dexterity and strategy, combining those two, and giving you nice character abilities to make the game variable as you play. What you're going to want to do is use your abilities and your characters as well as the associated terrain to protect yourself and deal damage to your opponent, dealing 5 to each one of your opponent's characters, removing each character from the game in sequence, and hopefully outlasting your opponent. The player that best does so, by dealing 5 damage to each of their opponent's characters, before each of their characters take 5 damage themselves, will be the winner. So just to give a few more examples of the abilities of things that could have been used in the game, Caesar here picked up an item on his turn, and he made 1 attack against Cadenza. But he has an ability that says he may discard an item, for example, his cursed doll that he picked up on his turn, in order to get 2 extra attacks. So now that he's here, he could also attack over here, and maybe he could bump this character into the box. He did. So this character is going to take 2 damage, and you would mark that on Cherry has now taken 2 damage. She ended up right near the edge of the table, very close to taking a 3rd point by falling off, and then would come back on at the end of the turn in order to start, at an appropriate spot on the board. He still has 1 more attack, so he could attack Cadenza again. He missed this time and did not deal a damage, but now Cadenza is in a prime position to hit him back. Other types of examples are, we have this guy here who actually has no movement, but at the start of his turn just places himself anywhere on the table. He teleports around and gets 2 attacks. Or you have the King Alexian here, who has 2 attacks and 1 movement, but starts the game with 9 life. So he's just a little bit more durable. You'll see that the abilities that are in the game are way, way variable. You can choose characters based on your playstyle, or hopefully get them in the draft that you use at the start of the game, in order to make the game enjoyable, variable, and fun for you. Well, there you have it. That is Disc Duelers. And as I seem to say with every one of Level 99 Productions games, this game has an immense amount of variety in it. And I think that's what they're going for in these nice little mini-games. They've taken from basic mini-games to now going to mini-games with so much variety, I'm not sure you could ever see all of it. In this game, you have 50 different characters. That's just a base for the variety here. 50 characters, 50 different abilities. Some have more hit points, some teleport, some have ranged attacks, some let you use items for various things, some, start with items and can carry up to 3. It's incredible the amount of variety just in that. But then you take that and you add 4 or 5 different variations to the game. Soccer and volleyball and racing and teams and the basic elimination and rotating rosters and just so many different ways you can play the game, and you can even make your own. On top of that, you have a huge deck of items, and so if you're using those items, you're going to pick them up, and that's going to change how you play the game. You can blow up terrain, or, do extra damage with attacks, or, deal damage when you're hit. Whatever the case is, so much variety. I love dexterity games. I love the fact that this one has all of that variety, that I can draft characters to change my playstyle every time, and it's just never going to get old. It plays quick, it plays fun, and the rules are straightforward and easy to learn. So if that sounds good to you, definitely check this one out. That is Disc Duelers from Level 99 Games.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at DicetowerNetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.